Welcome to Conversations with a Wounded Healer. I'm your host, Sarah Bueno. I'm a psychotherapist, teacher, consultant, and most importantly, a wounded healer, living and working in Chicago, Illinois.
And I'm your host, Anne Remy. I'm a counseling psychotherapist, yoga teacher, and trauma specialist living in Brighton, UK. On this show, we interview folks in a variety of healing professions, and we discuss the intersectional journey of healing self while caring for others.
But we're not just focused on individual healing, but also healing on the collective level, from white supremacy, late-stage capitalism, and the patriarchy. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Sarah.
Hi, Anne.
My dogs have chosen right now to bust into the room and be in the way.
Great job, boys. Girls? Boys?
One boy, one girl.
Great job, kids.
How you doing?
I'm really happy to report that for the first time in a long time, I feel pretty good.
Yay!
It's a secret. Don't get too excited. We don't want to scare my body away from feeling good. Yeah, it's unclear to me why I feel good now. So I would like to have more agency over that. But maybe it's the hormones my body is like, cool, let's do this hormone thing. I started a new medication where like a lot of my inflammation is gone, which is lovely.
Love to see
So I'm cautiously optimistic.
Great.
About feeling okay.
Okay, then I'm going to be cautiously optimistic with you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. How are you?
I'm good. It's the afternoon in the UK, and I've had a nice little sunny day where I got to walk around in Brighton, and they're just starting to put the Christmas decorations up. It's too early for me, but I respect it. It's the end of November, so it's close enough.
Yeah. Well, and this is the first time you and I are in front of the mics since the US election.
Oh, I was really excited to talk about that.
I mean, we don't have to talk that much about it other than it sucks, and it's also not surprising, and we've got a longer way to go than 4 years anyway, but yeah, we're going to fight the good fight.
Fighting the good fight. And I think my key takeaway from the whole situation is I'm very glad that I have moved into a profession that has the power to help and that actively works against or is not necessarily involved in a lot of the systems of oppression, as we've talked about many times on this podcast, but it's giving me it's saving me from full despair. I'll say that.
Yeah, right. Yeah. One of my good friends works for CMS, which I don't even know what that stands for, but it's been in the news a lot recently because Dr. Oz has been tapped to be the head of CMS. And so she texted me one day and was like, well, Dr. Oz might be my new boss. And I was like, that really sucks for you. You're just making a face.
CMS is Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services.
There you go.
There you go. That sucks.
Yeah. 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 At least she'll get good crudité.
Sure.
If anybody knows that. Speaking of
Speaking of crudité, you can support us in a lot of different ways. That one wasn't a good one at all. And that's okay.
Not a good one.
Sometimes Dr. Oz isn't a good one either. So speaking of not good ones, you can support good ones.
Yeah.
By going to patreon.com/convos with a wounded healer. You can go to ratethispodcast.com/wounded healer, or you can go to tinyurl.com/CWH merch. And you can support us, help keep this podcast going, help keep us happy in times of despair and sadness.
Mm-hmm.
And we thank you for it.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Jo.
How did you like Jo?
I am a little frustrated that her laugh is, I think, more charismatic than mine.
It's so good, right?
It's so good. And it's very rare that I run into someone who rivals my laugh. No, I absolutely loved her. She is a delight. I also have a cross liver. So it's always an angry liver. I like thinking of it as cross. It's cross.
It's one of those words you can't say with an American accent.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's delightful. And I was curious because she talked, well, listeners will hear, she talks a lot about her relationship to like intuition and spirit. And I was really curious, since you are generally not vibing with the spirit, I was very curious how that works out for you in your relationship with her.
I was anticipating this question, and I still don't have a specific answer for it, to be honest. Joe, so you'll kind of hear us talk about this, like the way that we work together has evolved because we've been, she's been my acupuncturist for quite a while. And as she's leaning more into some of her more spiritual side, she's like, "Hey, I'm trying this out. Can I try it out on you?" And my general feeling is, as I think I've said to you before, is like, I'm never going to tell somebody that their thing is wrong or dumb, or I'm not trying to be negative. And I think no matter what the thing is that she's doing, unless it feels very wrong to me, not wrong in general, but wrong to me,
Yep.
the more comfortable she is with herself
Mm-hmm.
and what she's doing, the better of an acupuncturist she is.
Mm.
So for me, it's very much like the more I use my intuition, the better therapist I am.
Mhm.
The more she's leaning into whatever feels right for her, the better it's going to be for her and for me. So in a purely selfish way, I'm just like, go for it, crack on. But also, it's interesting to witness another practitioner's evolution.
Yeah.
Like, I feel really grateful that she feels comfortable sharing that with me and that we're both in practices where we can kind of do that. She also influences how I work as a therapist too. So
Mm.
that's kind of where I am on it, is
Yeah.
not everything she does that is for her is absolutely for me, but it's not hurting me and it doesn't feel wrong.
Mm-hmm.
She talks a bit about, she's leaning into mediumship. I don't know what the
Mediumship.
word is.
Mm-hmm.
Is it ship?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Which is not my thing, but she asked if she could try it on me and I was like, go for it. Like, wholeheartedly, yes. And whatever happens, happens. And, if nothing else, I'm a good person to practice on.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mind being that. So, yeah.
Yeah. The skeptics are good practice.
Well, but I feel like I'm an open-minded skeptic, at least when it comes to this.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe not when it comes to watching The Sopranos, which, as we have recently discussed, is just not going to be my thing.
Well, we discussed it on Facebook, so listeners don't know, but
Yes.
I tried to watch The Sopranos, didn't get into it, and sounds like you're in the same boat.
Yeah, I was really set up for like, oh man, I'm going to invest myself in this. It's one of the reasons that I've put off watching it for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And we got 2 episodes in and I was like, I don't know, this is just boring. Like, meh. So,
Yeah.
Joe's not boring. So I think everyone's going to like this episode. I think there's a little bit of something for everybody in here. And if nothing else, she's got a super charming British accent and a very infectious laugh.
She's a delight.
She is a delight. And I hope that everybody comes out of this episode feeling a little bit lighter. And so with that, I'm going to introduce her. Jo Darling is an experienced acupuncturist and retreat leader passionate about helping you live a healthier, happier life. She has specialist interests in using acupuncture to assist fertility, support cancer patients and pregnancy, as well as acupuncture to help women through menopause and for pain relief. So please enjoy this episode with Jo Darling.
Are you feeling the seismic shifts currently reshaping the therapy field? From AI to rising healthcare costs, our field is at a crossroads. But what if these disruptions weren't just challenges, but opportunities for transformation? I'm excited to introduce Redefining the Future of Psychotherapy, a groundbreaking 12-week program where I've partnered with organizational consultant Mark Matisse to help therapists navigate and thrive in these challenging times. Together, we'll explore how cultural values and systemic forces are impacting mental health care. You'll learn to apply powerful frameworks like spiral dynamics to enhance your practice, transform challenges into opportunities, and develop practical strategies for both you and your clients. Starting February 13th, 2025, we'll meet virtually every Thursday for live interactive sessions. You'll earn a Level 1 certification in spiral dynamics, and up to 24 CEUs are available. This isn't just about surviving these tumultuous times. It's about working together to create positive change. Register now at tinyurl.com/futureoftherapy and join us in redefining the future of psychotherapy. That's tinyurl.com/futureoftherapy.
Hey, Jo Darling.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. Welcome to Conversations with a Wounded Healer.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. I'm so excited to. We've been talking about this for a long time, so I'm
We
glad
have.
we're finally making it happen. So I know Jo because she is my acupuncturist in Brighton, where I live. But Jo, can you kind of introduce yourself, tell us who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I can. I talk a lot, so you could be listening to this for the next 10 years. So as you say, I'm an acupuncturist in Brighton. I specialize in women's health because I find women intriguing, and I believe that our periods are our fifth vital sign. You learn so much from a woman. In fact, you could almost say I'm lazy because I learn a lot from women from their periods about how to treat them. So it's much easier than treating men in some ways. So, an acupuncturist who, in the last few years, realized that she was working more with spirit than she thought she was, and used my hand. So, I'm also a trained reflexologist. That's how I started because I used to work in marketing. So I started doing reflexology first to see if I could be a therapist, and that went okay.
Mm.
So I then
Mhm.
went and remortgaged my house and became an acupuncturist. So acupuncture primarily, but I do a little bit of healing with my hands, and I do also sometimes get messages for people as well, which is always, well, if it's welcome, it's welcome. So in the last few years, I've come to realize that my hands are actually very healing, which was something that I guess I was already doing, but I didn't know I was doing it. And also, I think a lot of the stuff that I talk about in my clinical space isn't always from the current Jo standing in the room. I had somebody actually in yesterday who said, "You should really train as a therapist," because I always come away with so much wisdom. And I was like, yeah, I don't have time for training as a therapist. Let's just leave it that spirit are giving you advice but it's not something I do unless it's welcomed. Of course, you always have to have permission with that kind of work. So people come to me for acupuncture, and then if it transpires that it's something that could be welcome, then I
Mhm.
will also introduce it. So I work with the full gamut of women's health. So from periods to fertility, whether that be natural or IVF, also with pregnancy, any niggles, through menopause and perimenopause. And I find actually people talk about menopause, and I always sort of flippantly say there's no such thing in Chinese medicine because it's aging, it's a natural process. That's how we view it.
Mm.
So it's relevant at all parts. Actually, when we're born, we've already lost a bunch of eggs. So in the pure definition of perimenopause, our egg levels are dwindling already.
Yeah.
But I digress. So yeah, I work with women. I also have my own range of products for menopause called Menopoised,
Mhm.
which are acupuncture inspired products, which really help. I've done loads of trials and various things. But I created those because I work a lot with cancer patients. And for me, my cancer patients are the ones who are very often lost in the narrative around perimenopause and menopause. And so I always make a point of saying not everybody's menopause is natural. Some people early, some people are, chemically forced. And then finally, the last part of what I do is I run retreats as well. And it's really interesting. I've started to run retreats because I see a intuitive healer, and she said to me, "You should be running retreats." So in my usual style, I didn't just start with a day retreat somewhere. I booked 6 days in Spain, and within a few months took 12 people with me, which was unbelievable. And now realize over
Mm.
a year later that that was somewhat bold. Well, it felt bold at the time.
Yeah, it is bold.
It's right. It didn't feel bold
I'm
on
like,
that.
people have been telling me to run retreats and I just don't want to do it.
Well,
So, like, hearing you do it is like,
yeah,
whew,
yeah,
it
yeah.
is
It's one of
bold.
those things I had to close my eyes and just do it. But I suppose because she's working intuitively, she's just given me a guide as to what my path is. And I was asking what my path was because I always assumed that it would be the products because you can reach so many more women. And that was my big aspiration, that it wasn't, acupuncture is one of those things, it's one of those therapies that you can't do without being with the person. Yes, you can give acupressure, and actually, I'm massively passionate about self-care. So everything I do is either woven into cycles, be that seasonal cycles or daily cycles or 28-day cycles or whatever it is, and self-care. So I think that's one of the biggest problems we have with the health industry and the way that we view health in the Western culture, that we often hand our health over to somebody else. And, there's been various health issues, as we know, over the last few years. And I think if only we had been given a few more tools to support ourselves. So Chinese
Yeah.
medicine is preventative at its very essence. And that, for me, is the key to health. It's taking care of yourself. So that's a very long-winded way of explaining what I do, but it's, a weaving in of lots of different things. And I love the retreats because that, I suppose, does mean that I can treat anybody from anywhere in the world. Because at my retreats, we always do certain things. We always have acupuncture. We always do meditation. We always do qigong. It's always a well-rounded Chinese medicine feast.
Oh, that's such a Chinese medicine feast.
Just come up with that.
But now I'm thinking about, I've taken Chinese medicine powders before, and I'm like, that would not be a delicious feast, but it would be a very healthy one.
We did have a feast last year because I do a Chinese New Year retreat every year, and I give people personalized predictions within reason. So you have a group of people, and we call it Butser bingo. So they know their birth chart, and then I'll say, and if you've got this in your chart, this means X, Y, and Z. So it's really good fun. But we also, last year we went to Wales and we had a beautiful feast. So this year we're going to Morocco. So it won't be a Chinese feast, but it will be a Moroccan feast. So.
Man, that sounds great, actually. Yeah. And so I've been working with you. I actually don't know how long I've been working with you. Some years now.
That means I haven't fixed you though, right?
Well, what is fixed?
We had this
what is
before,
fixed?
Didn't we? Exactly.
What is fixed? Because I first had Chinese medicine when I lived in Taiwan, and it was mostly Chinese powders. And it was the first time I had, and I was probably 25, 26, something like this. And, I've had irregular periods my whole life. And it was the first time that I was like introduced to something that was not traditional Western medicine. And I was like, okay, what is this like bullshit? You're just going to give me a powder and that's going to do something. And sure as shit, it did. And I was like, oh, maybe I'm the asshole here. And then I started getting acupuncture, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Yeah. And then when I moved to the UK, I was having acupuncture with someone in London, and he was kind of the first person who introduced me to the concept of like the mind-body connection, actually. So it was really, so you know me now, listeners and Joe, as someone who's really, really connected with my body.
Yeah.
But until I started, I know, until I started seeing Steve, my former acupuncturist, nothing whatsoever. Wow. Like everything was completely separate. So, yeah. And so when I moved to Brighton, I was like, this is something that's now really important to me because it helps my mind-body connection. And I think through working with you, it's really deepened that for me. But because you use your intuition, it really teaches me to lean into my intuition about my own body. I mean, because I'll say something like, I have a feeling you should, like something about my body is telling me that you should put a needle here. And you'll go, oh, that's funny because what your pulses have told me, which is, and maybe you can explain to us a little bit about the pulses, but what your pulses have just told me is that, your liver is hot and the point you just, said is a liver point or something like that. And that to me, beyond just all the great stuff that acupuncture brings, has really helped me understand and develop that relationship with my body.
That makes me, you can't see me, but I'm just grinning from ear to ear because it's, we have these conversations in a clinical setting, but perhaps I don't hear it quite in this context because I'm not in my clinic space right now. And so that's really, really lovely to hear because it probably wouldn't have been that long ago that I would have, well, I don't know about time because time, it could have been 5 years ago for all I know, but it feels like yesterday. But I just said to you that I don't work intuitively. I would probably also have told you that I don't work with energy, that I'm frightened of spirit and all of this kind of stuff. But I suspect I've been doing it all my life and certainly all my clinical life. But I don't believe good medicine is about what somebody does to you. I think it's what you do together. And I think the magic really happens in that moment where the patient, it's a loop, isn't it? It's feedback and the understanding and the listening, because I think it would be really easy And I'm pondering a lot on ego at the moment in my spiritual work. So ego kind of comes in. It'd be really easy to say, I've read your pulses. I know you. These are the points that you need. You could do that without listening to the patient. I know that wouldn't be right, but I know of people that would work in that way because it's just a formula. And that's why it's so beautiful to have a patient who can work with you and feed back into you. And I mean, I have one patient who will come in and tell me what points she needs. She's not an acupuncturist, but she knows, well, more or less what you're saying in a different way, but, points on her body. And it's like having an exam every time I treat her because she knows if I've hit the spot or not. And I used to be quite fearful of that. But, why be fearful? It's a magic thing. It's validating. If you ever don't really believe in it, it's validating acupuncture and saying, of course, there are meridians. Of course, there are points on the body which are gateways to certain functions and things that we can do to change our health. It's bloody wonderful. And I love to hear the fact that acupuncture helped you find that mind-body connection, because I don't know you any different to someone who is one of the most mind-body connected people I have ever come across. So that's beautiful.
It's so funny to me to think about, because I'm so that now. And it's funny for me to think back and be like, oh, wait, this was a thing I could only aspire to. So it's kind of nice to have that as like just a reminder, I suppose. But
that's just brilliant. We don't do that, do we? We don't look back and go, shit, look what I'm doing.
I do it with my clients all the time. Yeah, I always ask my clients to like, look how far you've come. And sometimes I forget to do it myself.
Yeah, we all do that, don't we?
I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about like how you read, what that does. Maybe give us a little bit of an understanding about that, because I think it sounds magic and I know it's not, but it sounds magic and I love it. Well, our bodies are magic, but like, I don't want to reduce it to just like, something that is
crazy shit.
Yeah, exactly. But it is so cool. I think how you can read that and it gives you so much information about somebody's body.
So first up, really, about pulses. The majority of acupuncturists you speak to will tell you reading a pulse is incredibly difficult. So I'm no different. I find it really, really difficult. And of course, so the actual physical part of it is you take 3 fingers, you put them on the radial pulse about a centimetre apart on each wrist. And they have different levels, but simply put, each of those 3 points has 2 levels, a yin and a yang aspect. And then because we're talking about 6, we're looking at 12 organs. 6 points on your 2 wrists and 2 points at each of those 2 different organs, a yin and a yang pairing. So that's about as simply as I can put it. So you sort of, the top bit would be yang, the inner bit would be yin. And it can be really, really complex. And one of the things that is really hard, and I think hard to learn and hard to teach with it, is that what I feel under my fingers, I might describe as like, and the easiest one probably to describe is like a guitar string. When you touch a guitar string and it's taut and it's hard and it's like a rope, like a tight rope. Now, I think everybody that touched a pulse that felt like that would probably feel it. But what if for someone that didn't feel like a tight rope, it felt like a nice silk thread? And so we'd both be feeling the same thing. It's like, isn't orange orange or is it green? With your colorblind, you're going to see different colors. So you might be using different language. And so what you feel could be the same thing, but calling it something different. And then you go to the text, and the text will then tell you that it's X and a problem with this organ, and then you treat accordingly. So the way that I do it is I'm just really simple with pulses. I almost see them as people. And so that description I gave you of a very tight pulse, this is when the liver is struggling, and the liver's main job is to free flow energy around the body. So that makes perfect sense, doesn't it? That if you're feeling this energy in the body and it's tight and it's hard, things aren't free flowing. That makes sense, I think. And so therefore you'll find that all over the pulse, and therefore you've got to treat the liver. But you'll also look at the person, and if they are cross or stressed or maybe constipated, or perhaps they've got fluctuating bowel movements or a whole range of problems, or any kind of pain in their body, headaches, you'd be like, oh yeah, liver. We have lots of different ways of diagnosing people. You can actually diagnose just from listening, and that's, I think, what I mostly do. But then I use the pulse to back up. So sometimes I'll know, yeah, the liver's really cross. And I'll be like, but why is the liver so tight and tense? Is it because it's not getting fed by another organ? Or is it generally because it is really pissed off? So I just think about them as people, and I know that the liver's tendency is to be cross. And so yeah, that's how I work. But yeah, pulses are really complicated. They're really complicated. And I wouldn't say that I'm great with them. I go with my instinct. And as I said earlier on about working with spirit more and more, sometimes I go to put a needle into someone in a certain point, and my hand will just move across and it'll go somewhere else. And that's particular points you can move between that happens with. And it's just a nuance, and I just trust that that nuance is right. But either would have been okay, but this was just slightly better and slightly more guided. So yeah, it's complex, but yeah, it's a wonderful thing. But this is also one point I would really love to make, Anne, because this is important.
Yeah, make it.
There are varying degrees of acupuncturists, and there is such a thing as a Western acupuncturist.
Yeah.
There's such a thing as dry needling, which people say, if they're a physio or a chiro and an osteopath, they often dry needle, but sometimes they call themselves acupuncturists because we don't have what's the word? We don't.
Like a regulating body?
Yeah, and
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And we don't own that word. So you can't, if acupuncture means to put a needle in someone, then you can't really stop others saying it. But this is the difference when you see a traditional Chinese medicine acupuncturist. They will feel your pulse. They will diagnose you. Whereas if you see any other kind of acupuncturist, they're not going to do that. And so what they're doing is those people are going to probably, because who knows, maybe not, but probably be treating all the symptoms that you have. Whereas a true acupuncturist is always seeking to treat the root of your problem. So if you think of a tree, the symptoms, the leaves are what you see, but the root of the problem is the deepest reason why this is going on. So we're always trying to treat that root. And that's what you'll get with a traditional Chinese medicine acupuncturist. And mostly we will have done a 3-year degree, which means, I didn't stick a needle in anyone for the first year of my training. And so when I hear of people going on these courses and they're needling people on the first day, it just makes my hair stand on end, because you need to be so respectful. It's someone else's energy that you're working with. Okay, they've given you permission, but really we have to be super respectful of other people. So anyway, just wanted to get my 2 pence in there, because
you're not going to get any criticism from me on that, because you and I have had this conversation personally. I feel the same thing about the therapy industry, especially in the UK, where it's not super regulated, and you do get people who have had like 2 months of training and start taking clients, and I'm like, like,
I had a patient yesterday who told me, so I was waxing lyrical about EMDR. In fact, I gave them your name, but she'd had EMDR from a personal trainer who was just trained. Anyway, we don't need to go into all of that, but and she felt like she couldn't go back to EMDR because she felt like she had really been, I don't know, harmed by it. And that's what's upsetting. I'm all up for anybody doing anything if it's healing and good and everything, but that it's upsetting when it messes with other people.
Oh, that makes me, ugh. So there's so much overlap between what you do and what I do, in that I'm using my intuition quite a lot, right? Somebody can tell me this happened to me and this happened to me, but there's no strict formula for how to work with that.
Right.
Or I'm feeling this, and it's interesting because as you were talking about thinking of like the pulses as people, or like the liver has a tendency to be cross, I was like, yeah, of course this is helping me get a better understanding of my body, because it's giving like personality to something that is just like an organ floating around in my body that I would never think twice about, right? Like I never thought twice about my liver, apart from like wanting to make sure I'm not, drinking too much or whatever, so that my liver functions well. But I never thought twice about like, okay, what does my liver need? Like what foods will help it, or what, like, because I think, now I'm not asking you to necessarily recall my whatever, but I think I have a hot liver. Is that what we decided? Or
probably.
Yeah, my liver's extra angry or something, and it does something to my kidneys, and I don't remember exactly what you've told me. But
you're talking about liver heat, probably, because that's what the liver's tendency is, to get over bothered and hot. It's like a traffic jam, if your car's sat in a traffic jam, it just overheats, and that's what's going on with the liver. Yeah, so it would be drawing on
That's
the
right.
kidneys because the kidneys are cooling. Yeah.
Yeah, but because you talk about that relationship, so what you just did is what you do with me in the room. And so it's the first time I was like, "Oh, like these little guys in here have personalities and each one of them needs to be taken care of differently." And
Mm.
if I take care of this part, it naturally takes care of that part. I think anytime you personify anything, you're more likely to take care of it, right? If you
Ah,
put emotions on a robot, suddenly everybody
yeah.
is crying watching Wall-E, right? And it's a robot.
Yeah,
It's a
you're
cartoon robot.
right.
But the moment it
Yeah.
has facial expressions and a personality, everybody's crying because it's
Yeah,
sad, right? So
true.
I think that's something that you're offering. And I'm really curious about how, well, you said you started in marketing, and I'm
Yeah.
curious about your own journey, like with yourself along this path. Like, because I know how much I've changed working with you, and I've seen how your practice has changed, but I'm really curious how you kind of got here in the first place and like what that did to you along the way.
Mm. Well, one of the really big things that happened to me in my adult life was quite by accident. I ended up as a money broker at the age of 21. And for those that don't know what that is, that's pretty hardcore. There were very few women working in that industry, certainly were at that time. And I imagine it hasn't changed a great deal. And the markets that I was working in were like the second hardest one. Like it was, yeah, I mean, I lost millions for people and all sorts of shenanigans. And I managed to do that for 3 years. And in the end, the money broking broke me and I had a breakdown, really young, actually. It's one of those things that I readily talk about it these days because A, it's a long time ago, but B, because there's so much shame about mental health. And I think it's really
Mm,
important.
mhm.
I often get this on retreats, or often just generally get this. People like, will assume like they'll say, well, you're really together, or you've got this or that, got the other. But, I don't know if anybody ever really is, or they've been working on it for sure. So yeah, I had a breakdown in my early
Yeah.
20s, went off traveling, quite by chance got into marketing and then worked in TV and radio for decades, really. And I often think the thing that got me started on acupuncture was my own fertility journey, but that's not strictly speaking true because I had it in my 20s for low mood and back pain and a whole myriad of things. My dad's best
Mm.
friend was a doctor who'd also trained as an acupuncturist. So not all
Mm.
doctors that put needles in people haven't trained as acupuncturists. So and I'd have one treatment and my back would be fixed, but I often forget about that. I was struggling to get pregnant and been a couple of years. And one of the big pieces of advice I give to women now who are struggling to get pregnant, apart from the fact that it's not always the woman that's the problem, which, I mostly see women, as we've already said in my clinic,
Sure.
um, it's usually work and it's usually stress that's getting in the way. So I actually changed my job. And within 3 or 4 months, I was pregnant. But the other thing I was doing alongside changing my job was having acupuncture. And the acupuncturist I saw told me, you'll be pregnant in 3 months. And he knew I was pregnant before I did. And I always thought that was magic, right? And I thought, I want myself some of this shit. Now, as a practitioner, I would never tell a woman they'll be pregnant in 3 months because I'm not doing the whole job, and neither was he. So how dare he? But he
Mm.
was right.
Mhm.
And secondly, yes, we can feel pregnancies and pulses, and I've had all sorts of incidences where people have done pregnancy tests and they thought they weren't pregnant, but I've known that they are. And in answer to the question everybody wants answered in that scenario, no, I don't tell people because it's not my place, because who knows what might happen next.
As someone who's not ever trying to be pregnant, can you please tell me if you find out that I am?
Yeah, I mean, I've had that scenario as well, but it's not my place, because I could be wrong for starters, and then you've started all sorts of shenanigans. But
Sure, sure.
yeah, I thought that was quite something. And I wasn't all that happy in the job that I was doing. And I don't know, I mean, I'd trained, that's right. I was already a reflexologist at that point, but not practicing. I was just fascinated at how the body worked. And then I just thought, yeah, I really, I didn't like my job. I got pregnant. I went off, had my baby, get Jacob, came back, made myself redundant. And the really weird thing, not weird, of course, because we know there's no coincidences, was that the acupuncture course I was doing always started in the September, but there'd been some political problems at the college and they couldn't start till the January. And so I got myself made redundant in the November and was able to start the degree in January. So, like, thank you, universe, for waiting for me and enabling me to do that.
Yeah.
But the really shit thing about it was that it was the first time it should be a 3-year degree, and they condensed it from 4. So I ended up doing essentially what was a 4-year degree because they hadn't properly cut it back in 2.5 years. And 19 of us started
Ooh.
and 3 of us graduated. It was cruel.
Oh my God.
For a health degree,
Yeah.
that's pretty shocking. But anyway, I
Yeah.
was one of the it didn't even cross my mind not to give up. One of my friends who qualified with me was like, every day, I'm going to stop this shit. I'm going to stop this shit. But no, I didn't stop this shit. And yeah, that was the journey to acupuncture. The journey to recognizing the spiritual stuff was slightly different and a fairly sort of standard path, I suppose. That my dad died and I went to see a medium, and she just said to me, you know that I don't like to use the word gift. And I'm so glad to be on this podcast about words because people sometimes think I'm a bit of a pedant, but I think language is really important. The thing
I
about
agree.
spiritual work and working with spirit is that everybody has some level of ability, and it's just some tune into it, some don't, and some are further down their path than others and whatever. So I believe we can all do it, but it wasn't until someone actually said to me, oh, you can do this. And then gradually over the years I've seen various people. I saw a shaman earlier in the year quite by accident, but I was at a really low point and I really needed something, and I walked in the room and I said, am I a shaman? She said, yes, you're a shaman. I was like, oh, okay. And that was quite sort of shocking to me. I think the word shaman's another interesting word, but definitely, probably a year ago, I wouldn't even have been talking about spirit, but it's developed. And actually, you said to me, the retreats I run have, like the center that I go to, I didn't know, but it's so full of spirit. And when I come back from there, I go up another notch. And you actually said to me one time I came back and we were or I was working with you, were like, I didn't know it could get any better. You've just gone up another level. And do you remember that?
Yeah, because that was the day, y'all, I got to tell you, I have always thought it is like sort of like secure attachment style for anyone who is a fan of attachment theory, that it's just a mystery that exists out there as an aspiration. But it was the day I came in and I walked out of your space feeling completely balanced. And I was like, this is what balance and health feels like.
Mm,
And it was I can't even describe it. It was like, this is what we can aspire towards, or this is what we maybe probably should be feeling like most of the time, but then life gets in the way and like, I don't know. I can't, but it was just like, whoa. Like I could swear to you that if you took my blood levels and my like hormone levels and everything in that moment, that everything would have looked perfect.
wow.
It was just so incredible. And it was because you were using, and I say this about being a therapist, when I can use my whole self, whatever that means, I am a better practitioner.
Yeah.
And you were using your whole self in what that meant for you in that moment.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things I say about being a therapist is the reason it doesn't exhaust me is because I get to use every part of myself. And I get to be curious about the parts that emerge. And it's a great testing ground, not in a dangerous way where I'm like, ooh, like I'm going to try out this new
Yeah.
thing that I don't know.
Yeah. I'm not playing with
But,
people. Yeah.
yeah, but in a way of like, oh, suddenly my intuition's feeling stronger, or suddenly I'm feeling like, oh, maybe let's play a game together to see, like I get these ideas or these thoughts or these
Mm,
feelings,
mm.
and I can start using them, and it may not always land, but it always makes the work better because I'm able to bring more of myself, which helps my clients bring more of themselves. And as you
Yes.
say, when you're working together, health is from collaboration on
Yes.
an individual basis, on a like doctor to patient basis, on a therapist to client basis, on a grand scale of culture, the more we
Yeah.
collaborate, the healthier
Yeah.
we are.
Yeah, totally. Totally. It's fascinating, isn't it? Because so Chinese medicine, I've treated, well, I should say more broadly than Chinese, because I can remember I had a Korean patient one time, and she's like, "Oh yeah, my grandma does cupping." For those that don't know what cupping is, it's like suction on the skin, and I use it to relax muscles down. But you can use it where there's pain to reduce pain, And the grandmother would just stick a cup on a painful knee or whatever, and that's self-care, isn't it? That's the model there, though, that you
Yeah.
can do it
Yeah.
for yourself, whereas it's
Yeah.
sadly not so much in this country, but hopefully things are changing. But yeah, that collaboration, that bringing your whole self, the bringing your whole self. Yeah, I'd not
Yeah.
really thought about that, but yeah, it's really weird though, isn't it? All of this stuff, because I sort of feel wary about saying it, because I think, oh God, people are going to think I'm woo woo and I'm weird. I mean, I have a patient, the first time he came, he said, well, I don't believe in any of this stuff. And I said, well, I'm not a stereotypical cliche of an acupuncturist walking around in tie-dye. I mean, very few do, I'm
I've
sure.
actually never seen an acupuncturist who's like,
No,
most
we don't
acupuncturists
walk
I've met
around
are, yeah, a lot more
of the Western world.
sciency than
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
but yeah, to talk about the spiritual stuff, it feels like I'm becoming more me, but I feel like I'm becoming more niche, and that kind of, I don't know, there's something I worry about that a bit, but I shouldn't, because I realize the more, I mean, it's authenticity, isn't it? And the more I do what I do, the more I get the people that want what I do. So
Yeah.
it's letting go
Yeah.
of that fear, isn't it? That there's, I don't know. I'm growing into all of this. I'm actually off next week to the Centre for the world's foremost Centre for Psychic Studies. And I normally wouldn't,
Oh,
I
I
wouldn't,
can hear Sarah, my co-host, Googling that now.
yeah.
Like,
Where is she? Is she in America?
she's in Chicago.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of Americans come over because, it's a really, really special place. Really special. Go.
Yeah, that's not going to be for me, but I bet she's going to Google that right away. Yeah, so there's this idea of bringing kind of everything you've got, and I really love that. The spirit of collaboration, and what I really like about Chinese medicine is that spirit of you don't feel alone. It's not an isolating practice, because it requires the practitioner to listen to the client in a way that I think Western medicine doesn't always. And it gets the client involved in their own healing.
Being a good witness to their own health. I always remember someone saying that to
Yeah.
me.
Oh, I
They said,
love
oh,
that.
yeah, they said, oh, such and such, we were sharing a patient. She's not a great witness to her own health. I was like, whoa, that's really, really important. And the other thing, when you said listening, I was like, oh, is that right? Is that right? We listen not just with our ears in Chinese medicine, because we're listening with our fingers when we feel the pulse. Some practitioners are listening with their nose because they're also smelling patients. We're listening to the tone, anything basically, the tone of someone's voice, how somebody knocks on the front door, how they walk up the stairs, all of those things we are tuning in to that person
That's
to
so
figure
cool.
out what's going on underneath it all. So I don't do that in my personal life. I remember
No,
my
that would be
ex-husband used to be like,
exhausting.
oh, he wouldn't let me treat him because he was like, oh, you'll know too much about me. I remember someone said to me once, well, you go nuts if you were doing that all the time. And certainly you do. So you would, not you do, you would. But yeah, we're listening in so many ways, much more than just what people are saying.
And that's true of therapists as well. And
Mm.
that's where we collide, I suppose. And so I'm curious, how do you feel about the term healer as applied to what you're doing?
I didn't have a problem with the word healer until Easter this year, when I'm training to be a Qigong instructor. I already share my practice on my retreats, but I'm actually doing the training, and the training I'm doing is quite something else. It's amazing. We do this thing called spontaneous movement, where we just let our bodies move as they wish, which is the first time I've ever experienced that in any kind of anything. So I love it. It's incredible. And I said to somebody, oh, I run retreats, I saw this intuitive healer, and she said that's what I should be doing. And she was like, oh, really? Healer? And I said, what do you mean? She goes, oh no, I don't like that word. What's wrong with that? Because it's just a word, although I am a pedant about words. And she said, we heal ourselves. We don't need someone else to heal us. So I'm aware that there are connotations with the word healer. I'm yet to find a better word. So I probably would say to people that I do healing. And I think intuitive healing is a really good description of the fact that you're working with something other. If somebody could give me a better word than healer, you've probably heard some, Anne. I'd love to know them. Yeah. So I understand why it's a tricksy one, because I agree actually that we heal ourselves. That's what I'm all about, advocating self-care. So I guess we're just, what's the word? Is it conduit? But if I said I'm an intuitive conduit, people would be like, what's she fucking talking about? And they already do that with me anyway. So I think sometimes it's easier just to say you're an acupuncturist, and then people need healing and they'll come. They don't know they're getting healing or whatever it is, you know. But I think, do you know what? I've realized this, that there's an awful lot of us out there who are therapists, acupuncturists, you know, whatever, reflexology, massage therapists, aromatherapists, and all this kind of stuff. I've really realized that it's all a facade for working, not all of it, but often it's a facade for working with spirit, and most people are. Because after all, what does spirit mean? You know, spirit could just mean intuition. Again, you know, people talk about God. I don't get into the whole God thing myself, but you know, everybody has a different God. Like I see a psychic counselor, and he was like, you have all these gods. And I was like, I don't have any gods. He said, yeah, the people that you think are better than you. And it's like, So the words are, you know, the words are tricksy, aren't they? But maybe I'll just call myself an intuitive conduit acupuncturist and see how many people don't turn up at my door.
Well, and that's, you know, the word that when Sarah asked me this question when she first interviewed me, I think the word I used is activator, but you can't, because like I want to help activate people's healing capacity or something along those lines. But you can't call yourself an activator because you just, A, you sound douchey, and B, no one knows what that means. So
well, you
I
also
think there's
sound like an activist, and then that's a whole different thing, isn't it? So yeah, it's really difficult, really difficult.
Yeah, there's no right or wrong answer. So with that in mind, how do you feel about the term wounded healer?
I think we're all wounded. I think that's where most therapists find their mission, from their wounds. But so I don't really have a problem with that. I wouldn't put it on my website. I let people make their own mind up about that. And also, you know, wounded makes you sound vulnerable, doesn't it? I mean, that's just the connotation of it, really, that if you were out in the jungle and you were wounded, you'd be weak.
Yeah.
And wounded is also a past tense thing too, isn't it? So for me, well, definitely I've had some wounds, but I'm working on them. It's always a work in progress, isn't it? I once said, I've seen several psychotherapists over the years, and I once said to someone about 20 years ago, 10 years ago, I just don't understand why I'm back in therapy again. And she said, well, you're a different person. And that was like, oh, shit. It's so true, isn't it?
Shit. I'm going to steal that. That's so good. That's so good.
This is another reason why you come back for acupuncture. It's not that I'm not healing you or helping you be balanced from time to time. It's that, as one of my favorite lines to people is, look, you can come in here. I can potentially get rid of your headache. If you go and bang your head against a brick wall, what can I do about that? And this is the whole sort of self-care thing, isn't it? So yeah, you're a different person, and definitely different times in your life. Even like for me with my son, when he hits ages that were difficult for me, they're going to bring up stuff for me. So yeah, that's why I find myself back in therapy from time to time. So the wounds change, don't they?
Yeah.
And they're there for a reason. So,
and it also, I think one of the things that, as you were saying that, I was thinking, like, we don't live in a society that promotes balance or consistent health. So I think it's really easy for the individual, for each one of us to go, why am I back in therapy? Yeah, well, the world is not giving us a chance to, like, very few people, I think, have all of the opportunity and capacity and like everything they need in order to maintain that balance. So like that day that I walked out of your office completely balanced, I was like, great. And then someone almost hit me with a car. Like,
exactly that.
We live in the world.
Exactly that.
So, and I managed that a lot better than I would have, like, if I weren't feeling super balanced. But, when I think of where I hope to get to personally and where I hope my clients to get to is a better state of symbiosis with your environment, to give you
Lovely.
more capacity to react when
Oh,
things
that's brilliant.
thanks,
I'll
to
have
give you more
that.
capacity to like move around when things don't go, as the environment shifts and throws you out of balance, to go, okay, how do we rebalance? I tell my yoga students, the way you balanced yesterday is not the way you're going to balance
Mm,
today. So
mm,
people get frustrated at themselves because they're like, I can do this, standing balance. Like, I have no problem doing it. Okay, well, you had no problem yesterday, but your body has changed. The environment has
mm,
changed. Your emotions are not the same as they were. So
mm.
there's really this, you really do have to readjust and recalibrate, moment to
Completely.
moment. And yeah,
And this is almost, I can't remember the words you used, but I will write them down when you remind me tomorrow. This is like living seasonally as well, isn't it? It's like in summer, it
yeah,
is
yeah.
generally, it is warm, it is expansive. You may be able to do a different posture in the summer to what you're able to do in winter. And any kind of practice or food or whatever it is needs to be tuned into winter. So you know, or summer or whatever season it is. And actually, I work a lot with this thing called the Chinese clock. So every 2 hours of the day, a different organ has different strengths in its energy. So the stomach is strongest between 7 and 9, and we should be eating our breakfast at 7 to 9. This is when we're most able to digest our food and nourish ourselves. Between 7 and 9 in the evening, the weakest point for the stomach, is the worst time to eat because we are least able to digest and nourish ourselves. And so it goes on around the clock. And so the time of day you're practicing, and also my acupuncture degree, and it's probably no coincidence, but it didn't feel like it at the time. It's like, I don't really know why I went to that college. I went to a place where we study this thing called stems and branches, which is it's one of the only places in the world where you can study this style of acupuncture. So we look at people's astrological charts. So not only are you dealing with the energy that's out there in the day, I mean, I can get books that tell me the different energy of the different day, today what the energy is, tomorrow what the energy is, and it will change. Oh God, it's really, really complex. But I don't do it because it is complex. But I can look at someone's birth chart and it will tell me what energy they were born with. And that's like being told what their DNA is. And then I can look at the environment they live in and then their choices and blah, blah, blah. And then we look at the sweet spot and that becomes their health. So I love all of this stuff. And it is about giving people the tools to live in the environment they're in and recognizing that we're not consistently the same. And what a beautiful thing that we're not,
Mm,
but trusting
yeah.
that our bodies are always striving to be in homeostasis. Even if you're really
Yes.
poorly, your body is
Yeah.
still trying, because that's survival. And that at the very root of it is what we
Yeah.
are built to do.
Yeah. And that's something I say all the time to my clients is, I know it may feel like your body or your brain is at odds with you, but in its own way it is trying to help.
Mm.
And we just need to tap into why it's figured out that it thinks this is helpful,
Yeah.
or how we can meet the need that it's trying to meet in a more useful or a more helpful way. Yeah. Well, we both know that we could talk all day.
Couldn't
But
we?
I want to be respectful of your time. And yeah, just really appreciate you coming on today. And just because I know that Sarah was hoping that you would kind of say something about perimenopause, could you give us like, what's an acupressure point, or just like a great hot tip, pun intended, for people going through perimenopause and menopause?
Oh my God, it's such a big subject. There are so
I
many,
know. It was a
there
big
are
question for, yeah.
there are so many issues with menopause, but I can give you like a very, very brief description of what's going on. So essentially, as we age, our kidney energy, water element, is weakening, and it becomes so weak it runs out, and in the end we die, and that's normal and natural. And so this aspect of aging applies to the menopause, and the root of all menopause, because it's the root of all aging, is the kidneys. Now, as you know, the kidneys feed the liver. So somebody who already had weak kidneys might experience more liver issues. So they might have this roofing rage, or they might have roofing hot flushes, or somebody might have insomnia or whatever. So, in order to be very catch-all, and to look after everybody, the one thing I would suggest for everyone is the feet represent the kidneys, the soles of the feet is where the kidney energy starts in the body. And just below your second and third toes, sort of a third of the way down your foot, is kidney 1, bubbling spring. This is a really wonderful point to rub. Now, you can Google that kidney 1 and find out where the location is. Really simple. It's a bit like rubbing the palm of your hand, which is what I would suggest for anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Putting some lavender on there and rubbing that for anxiety. I've got my products. So the Cool and Calm cream, the aromatherapy cream, is designed for anxiety on the palms and putting on the feet at night for the kidneys. And I actually created it pre-lockdown because I was like, women aren't allowed to talk about menopause at work. Allowed to. So they've got this beautiful aromatherapy cream on their desk and nobody will know it's for their hot flushes or for their anxiety, and everyone will want to use it because it smells so good. And of course the lockdown came and most people work from home. But yeah, kidney 1. And one of the things you can do before bed is actually soak your feet in warm water and possibly put some magnesium salt in. Of course, I don't know people, so to give them a one size fits all, but for most it's fine. If it doesn't feel good, don't do it, is what I'd say. But yeah, soaking your feet in warm water at night is a really good thing. Warm, not hot, for hot flushes, night sweats, and just feeling better in menopause generally. But there's a lot more you can do besides.
Yeah, of course. Well, Jo, thank you so much for coming on today.
What a pleasure. We could literally be here all day though, couldn't we? Because it's just, so good.
I know it.
So good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks to our guest for an amazing conversation today. To find out more about today's guest, you can visit www.headheartbiztherapy.com/podcast.
You can find Sarah at Head Heart Biz Therapy on Facebook and Instagram.
And you can find Anne at Spare Room Wellness or spareroomwellness.com.
Thanks as always to Andrea Klunder and the Creative Imposter Studios for editing, to Liam O'Donnell for the album art, and to Ben Mueller for our theme music. Until next time, bye-bye.